Well, let's return to our top story, the budget fallout. And the Chancellor's £3 billion Brexit war chest hasn't pleased everyone, with Eurosceptics urging Philip Hammond to spend the money now. Well, Mr Hammond said he was preparing for all eventualities, including leaving the EU without a deal.
Well, I'm joined now by the editor of BrexitCentral, Jonathan Isaby. Jonathan, he's setting aside £3 billion just in case it all doesn't work out. Isn't that a prudent step?
Oh, absolutely it is. And some of the changes that are going to need to be made will need to be made regardless of whether there's a deal or not with the European Union. For instance, some of the things that need to happen at customs checks at Dover, for example, there are going to need to be changes come what may. So it's absolutely right that he's putting that money there to pay for those changes. It's utterly the responsible thing to do. And I think it's utterly irresponsible of some opposition politicians and others to attack him for doing so, because the British people voted for Brexit. He and the rest of the government are getting on with delivering that and doing what is necessary in order for the country to be ready for it.
How much would you be happy for the country to give the EU to allow Brexit to go on, this so-called divorce bill? How much do you think is a fair amount?
Well, I'm not going to pluck a number out the air. The government have already talked about fulfilling financial obligations that were made during the course of our EU membership. Obviously, the current financial framework goes till the end of 2020. That's where we get the potential figure of 18 billion talked about in terms of commitments that would take us to the end of that particular cycle. But there are deep discussions to be had. We have to look at what assets the EU has that we can potentially lay claim to, for example. There's not been a lot of talk about that. And there certainly shouldn't be payment simply to have a trade deal with the European Union. The European Union has done trade deals with all number of countries, Canada most recently. Canada did not pay to have a trade deal with the European Union any more than the European Union paid to have a trade deal with Canada. These things are mutually beneficial, and certainly there should not be a payment merely for that trade deal.
But the payment isn't for the trade deal. The EU will argue that the payment is simply something that we are obliged to pay because we said that we would pay for it, and that they want this sorted before they move on to the trade deal.
Well, it's not going to be able to be sorted before moving on to the next aspect of the talks, because as the European Union are very fond of saying, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And there are certain aspects of the initial divorce talks which are actually completely intertwined with the final state talks. Issues to do with the Irish border, for example. We cannot know what situation we can have the Irish border until we know what terms of trade are going to be between the EU and the United Kingdom, obviously with the Republic of Ireland remaining a member of the EU. And it would be totally unacceptable, I think, for the British people to think of the government signing away money before they know the final deal that's in place.
Can I just get to move on to the budget yesterday and the OBR report that Philip Hammond highlighted in it? Productivity and growth are falling. We've already seen the impact that Brexit's had on the housing market. This appears to suggest that it's also going to have a negative effect on business, on manufacturing in the UK. Do you think it was a price worth paying?
Pardon me for being very sceptical about figures coming out from government bodies about what's going to happen over the next few years. We had, before the referendum last year, the Treasury and all kinds of other bodies telling us that there would be an immediate recession if we voted to leave the EU, that unemployment would go up by at least 500,000 over 2 years if we voted to leave the EU. Well, over the last year and a half since the referendum, we have seen growth continually going upwards. We have seen unemployment reduced quarter on quarter. So I take a lot of these predictions with quite a heap of salt, I'm afraid.
I mean, also getting your thoughts on Jean-Claude Juncker, who we were just saying a short while ago. He believes in the next few days that that should be enough to decide whether the Brexit talks sort of made enough progress to enter this second phase of negotiations. Are you confident that that's going to happen?
Well, I can't be confident of the EU deciding anything, frankly. What I would say is that the ball is very much in the European Union's court. I think in the Florence speech and in interventions that she has made since, the Prime Minister has made very clear that Britain wants to be a cooperative partner in all kinds of areas with the European Union going forward. It wants to fulfil obligations, but the EU similarly has to play ball. And as I say, the ball is in their court. Theresa May is, I think, going to be meeting Donald Tusk tomorrow at a summit. And of course, the European Council takes place in the middle of December, where the decision will be made whether to move the talks on to the next phase. I certainly think they should be, but if that doesn't happen, that will be as a result completely of the European Union's intransigence, not the British government.
OK, Jonathan Isaby, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Some breaking news coming into us regarding the